Welcome to Trending in Education. Mike Palmer here. I'm delighted to present to the world Trending in Ed's summer reading list for 2025. What I'm going to do today is walk you through a list of 10 books that I've read, many of which I've interviewed the author for. They're all about education, the future of work, emerging technology, and AI. As you may remember, we launched a Trending in Ed AI feed. This episode will go out on that feed with some bonus content from virtual co-host Nancy. In the main feed, there's just going to be yours truly, Mike Palmer, breaking it down, providing access to a great list for everyone. So with no further ado, let's break it down. Number 10. Number 10 is a book I've talked about before on the podcast. It's something I referenced as part of our appearance at South by Southwest TDU back in March in Austin, Texas. Always have a great time down there at the podcast stage. While we were there, I mentioned a few books that resonated with me. I'm going to mention them as number 10 and then number 9 back to back. First is a book called Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick. I've talked about Ethan several times on the show. He is a dream guest, so if anyone who's listening knows Ethan and wants to do a warm introduction for me, I'd love to have him on the podcast. But in lieu of that, I'll at least talk about his book and continue to reference it. I found it to be very digestible and focused. I was able to listen to it and knock it out in a couple days. It's the type of thing you can listen to more than once, which there's another book of that type that I would recommend for ear readers like myself, for speed listeners like myself who enjoy the audio format to consume this type of content. Ethan Mollick's Co-Intelligence. I first saw him present on it at the ASU GSV conference back in the spring of 2024. He was one of the keynotes last year. 2025, we could have used a little bit more Ethan. I think he's kind of AI optimistic, but he's got some real criticality and sharpness to his views that I found really refreshing. I'll include a little bit of sound from me talking about this book from earlier in the year. The first book, Co-Intelligence, Ethan Mollick. Show of hands, how many people know who Ethan Mollick is? That's great that we have plenty of hands, but I would say if you didn't put your hand up right now, you should probably check out Ethan Mollick's work, his book, Co-Intelligence. I am a speed listener. I like to listen to Audible at 2x. I knocked that thing out in like less than 2.5 hours. It's like maybe 4 podcasts worth of length. And it's extremely relevant, very practical. And the whole concept is you want to be the human in the loop. You know, everybody talks about there should be a human in the loop, an abstract, hypothetical human. What Ethan's saying is that human should be you. And there's a lot of reasons why, both, job security, future prospect, future of work for sure, but also ethics and data privacy. So hopefully, the people in this room, I would hope, are thinking about the ethical considerations, the biases, the problems with this technology. Those are exactly the people who need to be using it, not the ones who are running away from it, because there's risk. There's a lot of risk there. So I definitely would recommend his book. All right. So that's Ethan Mollick coming in at number 10. Ethan Mollick, Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI. He's a great follow on LinkedIn. I keep abreast by tracking his work, among others. AI ain't going anywhere. It's good to be critical about it. As Ethan advocates, it's great to be the human in the loop. You want to aspire to be the human who's working with the AI, and he leads by example with some impressive work there. So that's coming in at number 10, Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI, book by Ethan Mollick. Next is Sirens Call. This is coming in at number 9. I've also referenced Sirens Call. We'll bring up a little bit of that sound in a moment, but the book is Sirens Call, written by Chris Hayes, How Attention Became the World's Most Endangered Resource. So that's one that really talks about the attention age in a coherent and forward-thinking way. It's Very thought-provoking. It certainly is a lens through which I'm probably always going to see the world. I studied a lot of psychology earlier in my career and kind of kept to that social science kind of mindset really throughout my life. And I do find that Sirens Call kind of speaks to me on that front. And it certainly helps me understand the fractured media landscape that we have, how social media and polarization, politicization of content and of our worlds have sort of created this cacophony that we're all grappling with. I got some inspiration, found some solace in the book, and it was somewhat practical and maybe less political in the way that I would expect a Chris Hayes book to be. So in that sense, I actually enjoyed it more than I was expecting. I do get tired of some of the polarizing stuff that's out there, even though I'd say I'm probably a Chris Hayes fan. He's also a fellow Brooklynite, as I mentioned, with Ethan Mollick. Anybody who feels like hooking me up with a connection there so that I can interview Chris about his book, I'd love to do that on the show. It's surprisingly relevant to folks who think about education and think about the contexts in which people are consuming your educational content. I think it's important to understand that the way folks consume content is meaningfully changing and worth thinking about before you really engage in anything education related. Here's a little more on Chris Hayes' book from Trending and Ed's panel at South by Southwest TDU. Panel picker's about to open up. We'd love to be back down there on the podcast stage. It's one of our high points of the year. Here's me chopping it up a bit about Chris Hayes' book, Sirens Call, from South by Southwest 2025 in Austin, Texas. Chris Hayes wrote a book called Sirens Call, which is about how basically we're in the attention age and it's really messing with everything. So you kind of need to reorganize yourself, reorient yourself. And then the hope as a parent of a 6-year-old who's probably playing a game on his mom's phone right now, we want to get beyond screens. We understand the impact of this technology pre-AI. And now AI is coming on top of that. Jonathan Haidt's book's about how we kind of lost a generation, Gen Z. We didn't do them right because there weren't enough guardrails around social media and phones. Now we're starting to build that stuff back in, but it's tricky. It's challenging. And my hope, my aspirations, part of why I love podcasting so much is like, you're not really looking at a screen. You could be doing the dishes. You can be driving your car. I like to take walks in Prospect Park. I'm from Brooklyn. I will warn you, though, a little fun story about me. I was trying to do an episode about Unguarded, Scottie Pippen's memoir in response to The Last Dance. I only had a couple hours to do it, so I was listening at 3x, and I was walking really fast, and I wound up falling over. So I would say, you should ear read, I call these learn holes. Use them, but use them cautiously. Don't push the envelope there. Safety first. All right. Good times there in Austin each year. Hoping to be down there in 2026. Really exciting space. Love getting action from the audience. This is actually inspired in part by audience feedback, where I was dropping a lot of book references in there. And one of the folks there was saying, why don't you do a book pod? So shout out to Naomi Schlesinger, who attended our panel event at EDU, South by Southwest EDU, and followed up on LinkedIn. We're now connected, and she suggested, why don't you put a book list together? And took a few months, but here we are. Thanks to Naomi, and thanks to everyone who's giving me feedback. That's how the show continues to get better, and that's what we're gonna continue to strive for. Coming in at number 9, Sirens Call, How Attention Became the World's Most Endangered Resource by Chris Hayes. Moving on, coming in at number 8, I'm going to begin with external, widely released books and then zero in on folks I've interviewed more specifically within the education sector next. But the other book that's widely out there that caught my attention is a book called Future Proof by Kevin Roose. I've also referenced this one on the podcast and will include links to this one as well in the show notes for the episode. But Future Proof, 9 Rules for Humans in the Age of Automation, originally published in 2021, which I think is an indicator that Kevin Roose, one of the hosts, along with Casey Newton, one of the hosts of New York Times technology podcast, Hard Fork, which folks may be tracking as well. Casey's also part of the platformer platform, putting some interesting takes out there on technology and AI and what's emerging. Hard fork, worth a listen. Kevin Roose, his column in the New York Times, certainly worth checking out. And then Future Proof, 9 Rules for Humans in the Age of Automation. I found it to be strangely prescient. There you go. I like saying that word. Prescient. Great foresight, but you would kind of expect that from a book called Future Proof. The fact that it was published in March of 2021 is really a credit to the type of work that Kevin's trying to do, which is try to get out ahead of trends. This is pre-November of 22 when AI hit and the world changed. This was really ahead of that. And another reminder that if you get out ahead on some of these things, if you're tracking stuff when it first comes out, it really does give you a competitive advantage. And it's something we're going to try to continue to share here as part of what we do on Trending in Ed. So coming in at number 8, Future Proof, 9 Rules for Humans in the Age of Automation by Kevin Roose. That'll conclude the books that are more aspirational guests. So the next section really zeroes in on conversations I've had with authors, episodes that are in our back catalog that we'll bring in some highlights from and share with you as we head into summer 2025. If you haven't read these books, they're all great. They cut across early childhood, K-12, higher ed, and maybe a little bit of future work. I'd like to round out the author space a little more with folks who are writing about the future of work, but I've at least got a nice cross-sampling here of interviews I've done already, and then we'll conclude with 3 upcoming interviews, all based on books that can really round out your summer reading here in 2025. It'll actually make your listening experience to this podcast better when we're covering these books if you've read some of them or scanned them or just found content that you think is relevant related to them. So that's concluding the books that are out there in the world. Number 10, Co-Intelligence. Number 9, Sirens Call. And number 8, Future Proof. All right. Now referencing books where I interviewed the author, which is exciting. I'm going to start with the early years. As folks who listen to the show may know, I'm the parent of a 6-year-old, but a lot of the best evidence-based research that's happening around education, around impact, around all that stuff starts earlier, starts with early childhood education. I had a great conversation with Bror Saxberg last year on this topic. Love it when I can go deep. We did talk to Jenny Nash from Lego about stuff that is related to early childhood. And, now as my son gets a little bit older, the, 6 to 10 years of the education cycle, I'll try to stay focused in a little bit more closely on that. But this book is by Dr. Isabelle Howe, who is the executive director of the Learning Accelerator at Stanford University. Her book, Love to Learn, The Transformative Power of Care and Connection in Early Education, came out in February, and I was lucky enough to catch up with Isabelle to talk about that. And it really is about how we need to cultivate our relational intelligence. It is foundational to who we are. We learn to relate before we even really learn how to learn. And a lot of our early learning is very much powered by folks we're relating to, our parents, and then over time, connecting with teachers and other adults, other people who we can and train on. Love the conversation. We'll include a little bit there and hope to continue to pursue what's actually going on in the world of early childhood education. And then I really thought Isabelle did a great job of pointing out how relational intelligence in a lot of ways is something that will always differentiate humans from AI. AIs will be able to simulate it, but humans, there's an authentic, related, embedded in our humanity experience that is connected to how we learn that really can't be replaced. It's very much tied to motivation and really developing a learner's identity from an early age. Fascinating read. Isabelle was a great conversation, and she's continuing to do good work both through the Stanford Learning Accelerator and with research like what she outlines in Love to Learn, the transformative power of care and connection and early education, coming in at number 7. Here's a quick highlight from Isabelle's conversation with me. We'll include links to all of these conversations, these episodes in their entirety in the show notes for this episode, and we'll also be spinning up a playlist featuring all of these episodes that you can pick up in the show notes as well.
90% of the brain develops before age 5. So clearly, the early years are critical for any one of us. They are foundational for life. And we are, as a human species, we are born with billions of neurons. And I call all of us billionaires. We are born billionaires because we have all these billions of neurons in our brain. However, different from other animal species who can walk straight away when they are born or who can self-feed, we can't as humans, simply because these neurons are not connected to each other. What in scientific terms is called synaptic connections. Connections need to happen, and they are happening very fast, 1 million per second in the first few years of life. And those synaptic connections come from one thing, which is relationships. What is referred to as serve and return.
Amazing conversation there with Isabelle. And like I've said many times, understanding early childhood and how we begin our journey as learners is really critical to understanding who we are today. And I was really struck by Isabelle's concept of relational intelligence as really a new area of focus for us as humans, particularly as AI continues to occupy the collective imagination. Moving ahead a bit out of the early years into more the broader K-12 space, an area that I'm increasingly fascinated by, a space, a trend, a rising tide that I'm keeping track of these days is what is referred to as applied neuroscience. I had Horacio Sanchez on to talk about his book, Unlocking School Bias Using Neuroscience to Improve Student Outcomes. Had a fascinating conversation with him. We went deep on how the neuroscience of a school is as much an indicator, the collective neuroscience is as much an indicator of the overall health and vitality of the school culture as anything out there. And it is, in fact, something that can be measured. It is something that can be modeled. It's really interesting where then you get into applied behavioral neuroscience, which I think is the next step, which Horacio gets into. He's a really sharp guy. I was happy to get any time with him. He's prolific, has written many books, and is doing a lot of really fascinating consulting work in K-12. Let's listen a bit to Horacio here.
So most young kids today have two adaptations of their brains that are unique. One is that their empathy level seems to have gone down some based on interacting with technology, which is a big deal because empathy is one of the most crucial things to help us socially engage with people. And the other big adaptation that's been pretty consistent is there's been a significant drop in focus. And so that's why your kids are constantly multitasking. Every parent in the world now hears their kids say, I can't do my homework unless I have music on, because since you can't focus, what you do is you actually think you're doing more things, and all you're doing is switching around because the brain can't multitask anyway. So those are the big adaptations that happen.
Horacio Sanchez, Unlocking School Bias Using Neuroscience to Improve Student Outcomes, coming in at number 6. Number 5 is a different category. There are books that are coming down the pike. They'll be coming out this summer. In this case, this book's already out there on the shelves. It's been available for about a year now. The book I'm talking about is Math Mind, The Simple Path to Loving Math, Cracking the Numeracy Code for Everyone Who Has Ever Thought They Were Bad at Math. Shalinee Sharma is the co-founder and CEO of Zern, and she's the author of this book. Had a wonderful conversation with her about math education, developing a love of math in all kids. And what does that mean to parents? What does that mean to educators? And what does that mean to all of us, really, as we think about math, we think about the future of education and the future of work? How do we build a culture where folks are leaning in to their ability to understand math concepts, not just math formulas? how to get out of sort of the testing, plug and chug, rote memorization space and into something better, and how to do that at the K-12 level. Really enjoyed that conversation. That's coming up soon in the feed. Make sure you subscribe. Don't miss an episode, and you'll certainly catch the Math Mind episode with Shalinee Sharma coming in at number 5 on our 10 books to read summer 2025 from Trending in Ed with Mike Palmer.
When we present math as a running race, where only the person who gets first is the only math kid,
Yeah.
every other kid in that classroom is not going to run the race.
Yeah.
Motivation.
Mm-hmm.
You already know who the fastest kid is.
Mm-hmm.
So then math isn't for you. And that's nonsense. Because particularly in AI worlds, particularly where computation can be done by computers,
Yeah.
we need speed to be able to put it into our automatic memory so that we can use it in our learning. We don't need to be faster than a computer because we can't.
Yeah. That's number 5. Coming down to number 4, we have a legend in K-12 education. One, Doug Lemov, is coming soon in the feed. Doug is famous for his Teach Like a Champion series. He's got a new book coming out on July 29th. The book is titled The Teach Like a Champion Guide to the Science of Reading, Translating Research to Reignite Joy and Meaning in the Classroom. Doug Lemov coming in at number 4 with his Teach Like a Champion Guide to the Science of Reading. I loved having an expert like Doug on the show, just period, but then to get someone who could pierce through some of the confusion and buzzword bingo around the science of reading and the research about it, and really zeroing in on how to translate that, how to turn that into some practical tips. Things like reading whole books, things like having kids spend more time writing, and how those slower cognitive processes that take time, that require effort, are actually the things that can really ignite something in these learners and bring meaning to your classroom, rather than the sort of disjointedness that has existed for many years in how we really teach people how to read, and we perhaps forget to teach them to love reading and to find joy and meaning through those shared experiences. Coming out shortly, our episode will drop to coincide with the release of that book.
We wire how we fire. The brain is neuroplastic. After a while, if you read books in a constant state of half attention, or you live in a constant state of half attention, your brain adapts to function that way. You become distractible. But the flip side of that is that if you practice being attentive and you practice reading in a state of deep concentration, we can also rewire your brain. Every time you read, you're wiring your brain to read a certain way.
That's Teach Like a Champion from Doug Lemov. And then that brings us to our number 3 book in our hit list, which is also upcoming in the Trending in Ed feed. It's coming out with the book on July 22nd. It's dropping like it's hot. Friend of the show, Elliot Felix, has a book out coming in at number 3, which is The Connected College, Leadership Strategies for Student Success. Elliot's done some amazing work as a consultant with higher ed, over 120 universities. He also wrote a book, How to Get the Most Out of College, which kind of breaks down strategies for parents and students and families who are trying to figure out what college is right for their kid and how do you sort of go in with the right mindset to make the most out of your college experience. The Connected College, which drops on July 22nd. My interview with Elliot drops like it's hot at the same time. It's hot. Wow. Check it out.
Only 65% of students feel like they belong at their institution. And that's like the lens that you're going to see your whole experience through.
Yep.
Another is that courses don't often connect to careers. Everything doesn't have to be on a vocational track. I'm not advocating for throwing out the liberal arts. What I am saying is when students can connect what they're doing in the classroom to some kind of career path, it's incredibly motivating. It may even be the way they find that belonging. And it's when they're learning durable skills, they're learning how to understand people, how to communicate, how to collaborate. These are the things that are in demand now into the future.
Coming in at number 3, The Connected College, Leadership Strategies for Student Success, Elliot Felix. All right, we've now shifted into the higher ed portion of the conversation, where the next book on the list, number 2 on our top 10, is Kathleen Delasky, someone who's been on the show a couple times. Kathleen wrote a book, Who Needs College Anymore? Imagining a Future Where Degrees Won't Matter. Kathleen Delasky coming in at number 2 on our list. I interviewed Kathleen really to kick off 2025. It's a provocative book. There's some really interesting perspectives. It's a lot about broadening the definition of what college is, and from a policy perspective, what college aid might become. And looking at some of the policies we're seeing recently, there is a bit of a broadening of the definition of college. And Kathleen was sort of posing some interesting questions and perhaps advocating for that broader view, and also answering who does and who doesn't need college. Turns out the answer is it's complicated. Many people still do, but also some people maybe don't. And we should be open to having that conversation. Found it to be very timely and really enjoyed the conversation that I had with Kathleen. Let's hear a little bit of that before we wrap up with our number 1 show.
When you start to meet all the families that are on the other side of the diploma divide, you realize that a majority of American adults do not have a 4-year college degree.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, our construct of success is that you need to go to college to get a good job. And so I really set out with the book to, sort of tell the stories of some of the people who are not going to college or were looking to engage with it in a different way. Some of the families, whether at the high school level or people who had, come in and out of community college or regular colleges.
Mm-hmm.
So you meet some of those folks, and then you meet the employers who are also finding workarounds and hiring in different ways. You meet the colleges that are beginning to, think of different, methods, different programs, different ways to, serve either the new majority learner or the non-degree seeking candidate.
Yeah.
And finally, we go to the front lines of the high schools, what are college advisors doing these days? Because it is really changing as the college for all mandate and mantra is, losing momentum. And so what these advisors on the front lines are seeing is that they need to be able to talk about all the other pathways that students can take. And guess what? They're not very well articulated or advertised or understood or evaluated. And so, we have a problem.
All right. Thanks to those of you who have stuck around for the number 1 show, the last one in our list, the number 1 in our hearts heading into summer of 2025. The book is Teaching with AI, A Practical Guide to a New Era of Human Learning. This book came out last year. It came out in 2024. It's written by Jose Antonio Bowen and C. Edward Watson. Eddie Watson, I had on the pod. We had an amazing conversation about this stuff. He's really sharp. Jose Antonio as well. They're both worth following. They've also collaborated with Joan Monahan Watson on a book called Learning with AI, which is a practical guide for K-12 teachers. It's a really fast, evolving space. It's great to find folks who are able to get out ahead and curate some of this stuff, make it seem a little less crazy. Eddie Watson is the vice president for digital innovation at AAC&U, the American Association of Colleges and Universities. Absolutely worth following, and I'm delighted to announce that his book, Teaching with AI, A Practical Guide to a New Era of Human Learning, is the number 1 book in our top 10 list of summer reading, trending in Ed 2025. Here's a quick highlight from my conversation with Eddie, and we'll include links to this episode and all the other episodes referenced in the show notes for this episode. And we'll also be including that playlist, that dedicated feed, Trending in Ed books dropping with this episode. Be checking it out wherever you consume your content.
I guess what really motivated me to want to write a book in this space was recognizing that this was unique among the innovations that I had experienced in my 30-year career.
Yeah.
You describe me as a futurist. I'm pretty accurate, but it's often because I'm a boring futurist. Like I was on a panel 10 or 12 years ago during the MOOC revolution.
Right.
And, the question was posed to the panelists, what's higher ed going to look like in 5 years? And one of the futurists on the panel said, we will have fewer than 50 institutions of higher learning left in the United States.
Wow.
And I thought, well, I'm at the other end of that. So I was asked, I said, higher is going to look a lot like it does right now.
Right.
And we'll figure out a space where this will have meaning and usefulness, but we're still going to have, all of the same colleges and universities that right now.
Mhm.
I sort of look at strength of treatment, like how big is this and what's the shift that we could anticipate. But I guess I saw things that made me sort of shift away from my typical, like, well, this really isn't going to change things much, to like, this actually is significant.
Great stuff there from Eddie and from all the guests featured, all the authors who've written amazing books. I really do feel grateful for the opportunity to be able to engage with these great minds who are putting these books out there about where the world of education, the world of work, and the world of learning is heading. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll include links to each of the books and give you a taste of all of these conversations. We'll also be launching it as its own dedicated playlist on YouTube. If you just want to binge on these interviews with book authors, Trending in Ed Books is coming soon to a podcast feed and a YouTube playlist near you. Lots of stuff coming up on the horizon. You heard about our next 3 episodes. We have Elliot Felix dropping on July 22nd, coinciding with the launch of his book, The Connected College. Then on the 29th, we have Doug Lemov, Teach Like a Champion, talking about his new guidebook on the science of reading, translating the research into practice, which is something I'd love to get into, and really had a fascinating conversation with him. He's a very sharp guy, worth following, particularly if you're interested in K-12 education. And then the following Tuesday, we're going to go to Tuesday releases to coincide with the 2 book releases. And then on the following Tuesday, August 5th, is when the Math Mind episode's coming out, The Simple Path to Loving Math with Shalinee Sharma, the co-founder and CEO of Zern. Loving what we're doing, amazing stuff. If you like what we talked about here and you want to go deeper on the AI conversations, be on the lookout for more of this type coming down the Trending in Ed AI feed. Lots going on. We're hoping this helps you keep a little bit of track of this. If you don't read these books, maybe you have a chat with your LLM of choice about them. This is Trending in Education, Trending in Ed. Follow this feed for everything coming down the pike from Palmer Media, everything I'm associated with. And if you're interested in doing a show like this, if you want to appear as a guest, reach out to me. Find me on LinkedIn. Find me wherever you listen to podcasts. This is Trending in Ed. Thanks to everyone for listening.